The voting chamber beneath Denver fell completely silent as Secretary of Defense Alan Thompson counted the final ballots. His hands trembled slightly as he held the paper that would decide the fate of humanity. 27 world leaders had cast their votes in the most important decision in human history. The margin was smaller than anyone had expected. By a count of 15 to 12, Thompson announced, the Global Defense Council chooses to reject the Zephyrian ultimatum. Humanity will not surrender. President Davis felt her heart stop for a moment as the words echoed through the chamber. Half the room erupted in cheers while the other half sat in stunned silence. General Cooper buried his face in his hands, knowing that billions of people had just been sentenced to death. Senator Hayes stood with tears streaming down her face. Proud that humanity had chosen freedom over slavery, the message went out across all communication channels within minutes. Every human settlement from Earth to the outer colonies received the same transmission. Admiral Carter's voice carried the news to ships scattered throughout the solar system. All units, this is command. The decision has been made. We do not surrender. Prepare for immediate combat operations. Commander Morrison received the order aboard the Defiance and felt a mixture of pride and terror wash over him. His crew had been waiting for this moment, but none of them had truly believed it would come. Communications Officer Clark began relaying instructions to the fleet while the bridge crew prepared for what might be their final battle. Engineer Walker moved through the ship's corridors toward the reactor room, his mind focused on the desperate plan they had developed. If humanity was going to die, they would make sure the cost was higher than the aliens expected. The fusion reactors could be overloaded to create explosions that would take enemy ships with them. It was a suicide mission, but it might give other, human vessels a chance. Dr. Brooks worked frantically in his laboratory, analyzing every piece of Zephyrian technology his team had collected. His assistant Julia Green helped him search for any weakness they could exploit. The alien shield generators operated on frequencies that human science barely understood, but there had to be some flaw in their design. Look at these harmonic patterns, Brooks said, pointing to readings on his computer screen. Their shields pulse at regular intervals. If we could match that frequency and amplify it, we might be able to create a resonance cascade. Green studied the data with growing excitement. The timing would have to be perfect across the entire fleet. Every ship would need to fire at exactly the same moment using precisely calibrated weapons. Captain Rodriguez prepared the heavy cruiser Liberty for combat while her crew made final preparations. The ship carried 300 souls who had all volunteered to stay and fight rather than evacuate to the outer colonies. Engineer Chief Pete Johnson ran diagnostics on their weapon systems, knowing that every shot would have to count. On Mars, colony, Director Phillips organized the evacuation of civilians while Lieutenant Colonel Turner positioned defensive weapons around critical installations. The Red Planet's mining operations had been converted to weapons production during the past year, but their industrial facilities would be primary targets for the alien fleet. Lieutenant Sullivan worked at her station on Luna Base, coordinating the planetary defense grid with growing desperation. The orbital platforms surrounding Earth represented humanity's last line of defense, but their combined firepower was insignificant compared to what the aliens possessed. She calculated firing solutions and wondered if any of them would live long enough to use them. Pilot Martinez climbed into his fighter and ran through pre-flight checks with mechanical precision. His squadron consisted of 12 ships, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a city. Against the Zephyrian fleet, they would be like insects attacking a giant, but they would attack nonetheless. The alien armada began moving into final position around Earth as humanity's deadline approached. Their formation was precise and overwhelming, with massive battleships taking positions that would allow them to bombard every major population center simultaneously. Smaller vessels moved to block escape routes while scout ships monitored human military installations. President Davis addressed the world one final time from the secure bunker. Her image appeared on screens in homes, schools, military bases, and space stations throughout the solar system. "My fellow humans," she began, "we have chosen our path. We will not kneel before tyrants. We will not allow our children to grow up as slaves. Today we fight not just for our own lives, but for the idea that freedom is worth any price. Communications between human forces intensified as commanders coordinated their desperate strategy. Admiral Carter worked with fleet captains to position ships for maximum effectiveness. Every vessel, from massive battle cruisers to tiny mining craft, would participate in the coordinated assault that Dr. Brooks had proposed. The plan required split-second timing across millions of miles of space. Ship computers would synchronize their firing sequences to create a harmonic resonance in the alien shield matrix. If the theory was correct, the Zephyrian defenses would collapse for exactly 47 seconds. If it failed, humanity would die knowing they had tried everything. Engineer Walker reached the reactor room and began preparing the overload sequence. Similar preparations were taking place throughout the human fleet as crews accepted that survival was less important than making their deaths meaningful. The Zephyrians had conquered hundreds of worlds, but none of those civilizations had fought back with such determination. Dr. Green transmitted the frequency calculations to every human ship and weapons platform. The harmonic resonance had to be maintained within microsecond precision, or the plan would fail catastrophically. She included backup frequencies in case the aliens adapted their shields during the battle. As the final countdown began, families throughout the solar system said goodbye to loved ones who would never return. Children were evacuated to deep shelters while their parents prepared to defend them. Couples married in hurried ceremonies before reporting to battle stations. Humanity faced extinction with courage that surprised even themselves. The Zephyrian fleet completed their deployment and waited for humanity's response. Their ships bristled with weapons that could crack planets and shields that had never been penetrated. They expected the primitive humans to surrender at the last moment, as so many other species had done before. But humanity had made their choice. Freedom was more valuable than life. Dignity was worth more than survival. They would stand and fight against impossible odds because that was what humans did. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you threatened the only species crazy enough to choose death over surrender. The first shots of humanity's last war erupted when pilot Tony Martinez led his fighter squadron in a desperate assault against the Zephyrian vanguard. His small craft accelerated toward ships that dwarfed entire cities, their primitive missiles locked onto targets that seemed impossible to reach. The alien vessels loomed ahead like metal mountains floating in space, their surfaces covered with weapon systems that could vaporize his entire squadron in seconds. Martinez felt his heart pounding as he watched his targeting computer struggle to find weak points in the enemy armor. The Zephyrian battleships were designed to withstand attacks from weapons far more advanced than anything humanity possessed. But his mission was not to destroy these giants. He only needed to distract them long enough for Dr. Brooks to complete his shield frequency analysis. The alien point defense systems opened fire as the human fighters closed to attack range. Beams of energy that could slice through steel swept across space, turning several fighters into expanding clouds of debris. Martinez rolled his ship through the deadly crossfire, feeling the heat from near misses warming his cockpit. His wingman exploded in a ball of flame, but the attack continued. Captain Amy Rodriguez commanded the heavy cruiser Liberty as it emerged from behind Luna's shadow, her crew of 300 souls ready to face oblivion. The ship's railguns charged with power that made the hull vibrate, preparing to fire tungsten slugs at velocities that would turn metal into plasma. Rodriguez had spent years training for battles against human opponents. Nothing had prepared her for this. "Target the nearest battleship," she ordered. "All guns, maximum power." The Liberty's weapons opened fire in a brilliant display of human defiance, their tungsten projectiles streaking across space toward alien hulls that had never felt the bite of enemy weapons. The slugs struck Zephyrian armor and actually penetrated, sending shower of sparks and debris into the void. For the first time in the war, alien blood was spilled as hull breaches claimed enemy crew members. The Zephyrian response was immediate and overwhelming. Energy beams lanced out from a dozen battleships, converging on the Liberty's position. Rodriguez felt her ship shudder under impacts that would have destroyed any other vessel in the human fleet. The cruiser's armor held for precious seconds, before beginning to fail under the sustained bombardment. On Earth's surface, General Ryan Cooper coordinated the ground-based defense network while Major Pete Johnson operated the massive orbital cannons. The planet's sky lit up with streaks of energy as human and alien weapons exchanged fire across the void. Cities began burning under alien bombardment, but the defense grid held firm, protecting the billions of civilians huddled in underground shelters. The orbital platforms surrounding Earth unleashed everything they had at the approaching alien fleet. Nuclear missiles detonated against Zephyrian shields in flowers of atomic fire that briefly outshone the sun. Laser batteries carved through space with beams of coherent light that could boil oceans. Railgun platforms hurled projectiles at significant fractions of light speed toward targets that seemed impossibly large. Lieutenant Kate Sullivan discovered something extraordinary during the battle's chaos. Her sensors detected fluctuations in the alien shield matrix that followed a predictable pattern. The Zephyrian defenses operated on harmonic frequencies that could be mapped and potentially exploited. Her fingers flew across her control panel as she transmitted the data to Dr. Brooks on Earth. "I'm reading harmonic resonance in their shield generators," she reported. "The frequency shifts every 30 seconds, but the pattern repeats. If we could synchronize our weapons to match that frequency, we might be able to create a cascade." Failure. Dr. Brooks received Sullivan's data and immediately began calculating the precise frequencies needed to exploit the alien shield weakness. His laboratory had become the most important location in human space as scientists worked to turn theoretical physics into practical weapons. The harmonic resonance theory was sound, but implementing it would require perfect coordination across the entire human fleet. The plan that emerged was audacious beyond imagination. Every human ship and weapons platform would need to fire simultaneously at exactly the right frequency to create a resonance cascade in the Zephyrian shield matrix. The timing had to be perfect within microseconds, and the frequency had to be maintained for exactly 47 seconds to cause complete shield failure. Commander Jake Morrison aboard the Defiance realized they had found their miracle, but implementing it would require coordination that had never been attempted before. The human fleet was scattered across millions of miles of space, with communication delays that made split-second timing nearly impossible. They would need to rely on computer synchronization and hope that human technology was precise enough to pull off the impossible. Admiral Lisa Carter took command of the operation from her flagship, her voice carrying across the solar system as she coordinated with fleet commanders throughout human space. Every ship from massive battle cruisers to tiny mining vessels would need to participate in the synchronized attack. There would be no second chances and no margin for error. The battle raged around Earth as humanity prepared to play their final card. Martinez continued his suicidal attack run, his fighter somehow surviving the storm of enemy fire while other squadron members died around him. His distraction was working as alien weapons focused on the small, fast targets instead of the larger ships maneuvering into position. Captain Rodriguez fought to keep the Liberty operational as alien fire stripped away armor plating and weapon systems. Her engineering crew performed miracles in the engine room, keeping the ship functional despite damage that should have destroyed it. The cruiser's guns continued firing even as sections of the ship vented atmosphere into space. The Zephyrian fleet began to realize that these primitive humans were actually fighting back with surprising effectiveness. Their commanders had expected immediate surrender or quick annihilation. Instead, they faced an enemy that refused to acknowledge the hopelessness of their situation. Human ships continued attacking even as they were destroyed, their crews fighting until the very last moment. Lieutenant Colonel Grace Turner launched every missile Mars colony possessed, their warheads modified to emit the specific frequency pattern that Dr. Brooks had identified. The Red Planet's defense installations had been converted into one massive weapons platform, with every mining laser and industrial tool pressed into military service. Even the asteroid miners contributed to the desperate plan, their drilling equipment recalibrated to match the harmonic requirements. Ships that had never been designed for combat joined the fleet, their crews determined to contribute whatever they could to humanity's last stand. The spirit of defiance spread throughout human space like wildfire. As the countdown reached its final moments, every human weapon in the solar system prepared to fire in perfect synchronization. The odds against success were astronomical, But humanity had already chosen to face impossible odds rather than surrender their freedom. The galaxy was about to witness something that had never happened before in its long history. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and watched the stars disappear behind a wall of alien metal. The enemy ships stretched across space like a dark ocean, their hulls gleaming under the distant sun. He had fought in dozens of battles during the war but had never seen anything like this. The Zephyrian Empire had brought their entire fleet to Earth's doorstep, and humanity was about to learn what real fear felt like. Admiral Lisa Carter received the first transmission at 600 hours in the underground bunker beneath Denver. The message came through in perfect English, which made it even more terrifying. The aliens had been watching humanity for years, learning their languages and studying their weaknesses. The voice that spoke through the speakers was cold and empty of any emotion that humans would recognize. "People of Earth," the voice said, "we are the Zephyrian Empire. We have conquered 400 worlds across this galaxy. Your planet is now under our control. You have 36 hours to make a choice." Dr. Nathan Brooks was in his laboratory when the message played across every communication channel on Earth. He stopped working on his protein samples and listened to words that would change everything. The aliens explained their offer in simple terms that left no room for confusion. Humanity could surrender and live, or they could fight and die. Captain Amy Rodriguez was commanding a patrol ship near Mars when her communication officer turned pale and handed her the decoded message. She read it twice before the full meaning sank in. The Zephyrians would relocate all humans to farming worlds in distant systems. They would take away all technology and weapons. Human children would be raised as servants in alien households. Adults would work in fields and factories until they died. President Helen Davis called an emergency meeting of the Global Defense Council within minutes of receiving the transmission. World leaders appeared on screens throughout the secure conference room, their faces showing the same mixture of shock and fear that she felt in her own chest. General Ryan Cooper spoke first, his voice steady despite the impossible situation they faced. "We need to consider this offer seriously," Cooper said. "Our combined fleets have maybe 200 ships. Intelligence reports show over 3,000 enemy vessels in their formation. Our weapons can barely scratch their shields. This might be our only chance to save the human race." Senator Linda Hayes disagreed with every word Cooper spoke. She stood up from her seat and faced the assembled leaders with fire in her eyes. "They want to make us slaves," she said. "They want to take our children and turn them into servants. This is not survival. This is a slow death spread across generations." The debate continued for hours while the alien fleet waited in orbit around Earth like vultures circling a dying animal. Military experts presented battle plans that showed human forces being destroyed in minutes. Scientists explained how alien technology was centuries ahead of anything humanity possessed. Economists calculated how long the human race might survive under Zephyrian rule. Lieutenant Kate Sullivan ran diagnostics on the planetary defense grid from her station on Luna Base. The numbers on her screen told a story of hopeless odds. Earth's orbital weapons platforms could fire for maybe 10 minutes before being overwhelmed. The moon bases might last an hour. Mars colony would fall within a day. Every calculation led to the same conclusion. Rookie pilot Tony Martinez prepared his fighter in the hangar bay of the orbital defense station. His hands shook as he checked his weapon systems for the third time. The missiles mounted under his wings were designed to fight human ships in small conflicts. Against Zephyrian armor, they would be like throwing rocks at a mountain. Dr. Brooks analyzed captured alien technology in his secure laboratory while the politicians argued. His team had recovered fragments from previous skirmishes with Zephyrian scout ships. The metal was unlike anything in human science. Their energy weapons operated on principles that human physicists barely understood. Their engines could bend space in ways that made faster-than-light travel look simple. Engineer Chris Walker worked in the engine room of the Defiance, knowing that his ship represented humanity's most advanced technology. The fusion reactors that powered their weapons would seem primitive to aliens who could cross the galaxy in weeks. The armor plating that protected the crew would crumble under weapons that could crack planets. President Davis walked the halls, of the underground bunker and thought about the choice that faced humanity. In 36 hours, the Zephyrian fleet would either accept their surrender or begin the extermination of the human race. There would be no negotiation and no second chances. The aliens had made their position clear. Communications Officer Betty Clark monitored alien transmissions from her post aboard the Defiance. The enemy ships talked to each other in languages that human computers could not decode, but their formation patterns and movements suggested they were prepared for immediate action. They had not come to Earth to wait. The Global Defense Council continued their debate as the deadline approached. Some argued for surrender, believing that slavery was better than extinction. Others demanded that humanity fight regardless of the odds. President Davis listened to every argument and felt the weight of 8 billion lives pressing down on her shoulders. Director Sam Phillips coordinated evacuation procedures at Mars Colony, while Lieutenant Colonel Grace Turner positioned the last defense batteries around the Red Planet. Civilian transports moved non-essential personnel to deep shelters, but everyone knew that concrete and steel would provide little protection against weapons that could destroy cities. As the final hours ticked away, every human in the solar system waited for the decision that would define their future. Children looked up at the night sky and saw stars that might be the last free sight their eyes would ever witness. Parents held their families close and wondered if they would live to see another dawn. The choice was simple but impossible. Bow down and accept slavery or stand up and face certain death. Either path led to the end of humanity as a free species, but only one path offered the slim chance of maintaining their dignity in defeat. The clock continued counting down toward a decision that would echo through history. Commander Jake Morrison felt the weight of humanity's future pressing down on his shoulders as he synchronized the Defiance's weapon systems with the fleet-wide targeting computer. Every human ship in the solar system was connected through a network that had never been tested under combat conditions. The harmonic frequency attack required precision that exceeded the capabilities of individual crews, so everything depended on computer coordination across millions of miles of space. Communications Officer Betty Clark maintained contact with over 2,000 vessels from Admiral Carter's massive command ship to civilian freighters that had volunteered for the desperate mission. Her voice remained steady as she relayed synchronization data, but Morrison could see the tension in her movements. The resonance frequency had to be maintained within microsecond precision, or the plan would fail catastrophically. Dr. Nathan Brooks monitored the harmonic readings from his laboratory on Earth, while his assistant Julia Green prepared the final calculations. The Zephyrian shield matrix operated on quantum principles that human science barely understood, but the mathematics were solid. If every human weapon could maintain the precise frequency pattern for exactly 47 seconds, the alien defenses would collapse in a cascading failure that would leave their entire fleet vulnerable. Captain Amy Rodriguez positioned the Liberty at the formation center, her ship's enhanced targeting computer serving as the master coordinator for the synchronized attack. The cruiser had taken massive damage during the initial engagement, but her crew had performed miracles to keep the essential systems operational. Sparks flew from damaged control panels while emergency lighting cast strange shadows across the bridge. "All stations report ready," Rodriguez announced over the fleet communication network. "Target frequency locked and stable. We are go for synchronized assault." Lieutenant Colonel Grace Turner launched every missile Mars Colony possessed, their warheads modified to emit the specific frequency pattern that would hopefully bring down the Zephyrian shields. The Red Planet's industrial capacity had been converted entirely to weapons production during the past year, turning mining equipment and manufacturing plants into the largest weapons factory in human history. Even the miners working in the asteroid belt contributed to the desperate plan. Their drilling lasers recalibrated to match the harmonic requirements. These civilian workers had never trained for combat, but they understood that humanity's survival depended on every weapon firing in perfect synchronization. Their equipment was crude compared to military hardware, but it could produce the required frequencies. The countdown reached its final moments as pilot Tony Martinez led his fighters in one last diversionary attack, drawing alien attention away from the main fleet. His squadron had been reduced to just 3 ships, but they continued their suicidal assault against impossible odds. Martinez felt his fighters shaking apart around him as enemy fire stripped away armor and weapon systems, but he pressed forward. The Zephyrian fleet had begun to realize that something unusual was happening. Their sensors detected the human ships moving into attack formation, but the coordination was unlike anything they had encountered before. Previous civilizations had fought with individual tactics and scattered resistance. These humans were acting as a single organism with thousands of separate parts. Lieutenant Kate Sullivan made final adjustments to the planetary defense grid, ensuring that Earth's contribution to the attack would be perfectly timed with the rest of the fleet. The orbital platforms had taken severe damage during the battle, but enough weapons remained operational to participate in the synchronized assault. Her fingers danced across the control panels as she made last-second calibrations. Admiral Lisa, Carter's voice rang across the solar system as she initiated the final countdown. Every human commander listened to her words, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether their species lived or died. The communication delay meant that ships near the outer planets had already fired by the time her voice reached Earth, but the computer synchronization would account for those differences. All units, this is Admiral Carter. Commence synchronized assault in 10 seconds. Remember that we fight not just for ourselves, but for every human who will ever be born. Make your shots count. The moment arrived with mathematical precision. Every human weapon in the solar system fired simultaneously. Their combined energy focused on the harmonic frequency that Dr. Brooks had identified. Nuclear missiles detonated at exactly the right moment, while laser batteries pulsed in perfect rhythm. Railguns hurled projectiles that would arrive at precisely calculated intervals. Industrial equipment throughout the asteroid belt added their power to the coordinated assault. The effect on the Zephyrian fleet was immediate and spectacular. Their shield generators began resonating with the harmonic frequency, creating vibrations that spread throughout their defensive matrix. The alien ships had never encountered an attack like this, where thousands of primitive weapons worked together to exploit a fundamental flaw in their technology. For 47 seconds, humanity's fury was unleashed in perfect unity against their oppressors. Every shot was timed to maintain the harmonic resonance that would tear apart the alien defenses. The precision required was beyond anything humans had ever attempted, but their computers performed flawlessly under the most extreme conditions imaginable. Dr. Green watched her calculations become reality as the Zephyrian shields flickered and began to fail. The quantum harmonics were working exactly as predicted, creating cascade failures that spread through the alien defensive network like a virus. Ships that had seemed invincible moments before were suddenly vulnerable to weapons they had previously ignored. The shield collapse was total and devastating. Across the entire Zephyrian armada, defensive systems failed simultaneously as the harmonic resonance destroyed their quantum matrix. For the first time in their conquest of the galaxy, the alien fleet found themselves facing enemy fire without protection. Their hulls, designed to rely on energy shields, were suddenly exposed to human weapons. But the aliens recovered quickly from their surprise. Zephyrian engineers began adapting their systems to counter the harmonic attack, installing new frequency generators that would prevent future resonance cascades. The window of opportunity was closing fast, and humanity had only minutes to exploit their temporary advantage. Commander Morrison realized that everything now depended on speed and aggression. The human fleet had to close the distance and engage the alien ships before their shields could be restored. It was still a desperate gamble against overwhelming odds, but for the first time since the war began, humanity had a fighting chance. All ships advanced to close combat range, Morrison ordered. We may never get another opportunity like this. Make it count. The battle that would determine the fate of humanity was about to begin in earnest. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 400 worlds, but they had never faced an enemy like this. Humanity was about to teach the galaxy what happened when you threatened the only species crazy enough to choose death over surrender. The battle that followed became legend throughout the galaxy. With their shields down, the Zephyrian fleet found themselves facing an enemy they had completely underestimated. Commander Jake Morrison led the charge as human ships closed the distance at maximum acceleration, their weapons finally able to penetrate alien hulls that had seemed impervious just minutes before. The Defiance's crew fought with the desperation of the condemned and the fury of the free. Captain Amy Rodriguez guided the Liberty through the alien formation like a shark moving through a school of fish. Her guns blazed continuously as she targeted the command vessels that Dr. Brooks had identified through analysis of their communication patterns. The cruiser's tungsten slugs punched through Zephyrian hull plating, sending fragments of alien metal spinning into space as internal explosions lit up the enemy ships from within. The alien fleet tried to reform their defensive positions, but humanity gave them no time to recover. Every human ship pressed their attack with suicidal determination, closing to point-blank range where their primitive weapons could cause maximum damage. Pilot Tony Martinez led his remaining fighters in strafing runs against alien weapon systems, his damaged craft somehow still functioning despite taking hits that should have destroyed it. On Mars Colony, Lieutenant Colonel Grace Turner watched as her missiles found their targets, crippling several alien dreadnoughts that had been preparing to bombard the Red Planet. The colony's converted mining equipment proved surprisingly effective against unshielded enemy hulls. Massive industrial lasers designed to cut through asteroids sliced through alien armor like it was paper. Dr. Nathan Brooks had identified the Zephyrian command structure through their communication patterns, allowing human forces to target their leadership with precision strikes. The alien fleet began losing coordination as command ships fell to concentrated fire from multiple human vessels. Without their sophisticated battle networks, individual Zephyrian ships found themselves isolated and vulnerable. The mining stations throughout the asteroid belt contributed their industrial might to the battle, using equipment that had never been designed as weapons. Ore processors became missile launchers while refining facilities served as ammunition factories. The civilian workers operated their machinery with the same skill they had used for years, except now they were mining alien hulls instead of asteroids. Admiral Lisa Carter's flagship had taken severe damage during the initial engagement, but she continued coordinating the battle from her crippled command center. Her tactical displays showed human ships swarming over the alien formation like angry insects, each one contributing whatever firepower they possessed to the desperate assault. The coordination that had made the shield collapse possible now served them in close combat. The tide of battle shifted dramatically when engineer Chris Walker aboard the Defiance successfully overloaded his ship's reactor core and rammed it into a Zephyrian command vessel. The explosion vaporized both ships instantly, but it eliminated the alien fleet's primary coordination node. Similar sacrifices occurred throughout the battle, as human crews chose certain death to take enemy ships with them. Lieutenant Kate Sullivan coordinated the planetary defense platforms in a systematic bombardment of the largest alien vessels. Earth's orbital weapons had been damaged during the opening assault, but enough remained functional to contribute significant firepower to the battle. Nuclear warheads detonated against unshielded alien hulls, creating expanding spheres of destruction that consumed everything within their reach. The Zephyrian Empire had built their military doctrine around technological superiority and overwhelming firepower. They had never faced an enemy that refused to acknowledge defeat or that fought with such creative desperation. Human tactics made no sense from their perspective, but the results were undeniable as their massive fleet began falling apart under relentless assault. President Helen Davis maintained communication with the fleet from her underground bunker, coordinating supply runs and medical evacuations while the battle raged above Earth. Her voice carried across the solar system as she provided encouragement to crews who were giving everything they had for humanity's freedom. The politicians who had voted for defiance now watched their decision play out in fire and steel. Dr. Julia Green led the research teams that analyzed wreckage from destroyed alien ships, transmitting tactical information to human commanders in real time. Every piece of debris provided new insights into Zephyrian technology and potential weaknesses. The scientific knowledge they gained during the battle would advance human understanding by centuries. As the hours passed, the impossible began to seem achievable. The alien fleet that had seemed invincible was being systematically destroyed by ships they had considered primitive. Zephyrian casualties mounted as human forces pressed their attack without mercy. The empire that had conquered hundreds of worlds was learning what it meant to face an enemy that simply refused to surrender. The final phase of the battle began when the remaining alien ships attempted to retreat, but humanity had positioned vessels throughout the solar system to prevent escape. Mining ships from the outer colonies blocked escape routes while damaged military vessels used their last moments of life to ram fleeing enemies. No Zephyrian ship would leave to report what had happened. Pilot Martinez, his fighter now held together by emergency patches and determination, led the final assault against the alien command ship. His missiles penetrated the vessel's hull and detonated inside the bridge, eliminating the last of the Zephyrian leadership. As the massive ship broke apart, he broadcast the victory message across all human frequencies. The silence that followed was more profound than the noise of battle had been. For the first time in months, human space was free of alien presence. The empire that had seemed unstoppable had been completely destroyed by a species they had intended to enslave. The wreckage floating throughout the solar system told the story of humanity's impossible victory. In the aftermath, the survivors began the long process of rebuilding and understanding what they had accomplished. The ships that had been constructed during the war became the foundation of humanity's first interstellar fleet. Technology recovered from alien wreckage advanced human science by centuries in just a few months. The memorial built on Earth bore the names of everyone who had fought in the battle, from fleet commanders to civilian volunteers who had given their lives for freedom. Commander Morrison's courage, Admiral Carter's sacrifice, and Dr. Brooks' brilliant strategy became the foundation myths of what would become the Terran Federation. Lieutenant Sullivan, now promoted to commander, led the first human expedition beyond the solar system aboard a rebuilt vessel named Defiance. They carried with them a message that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Humanity would never kneel, never surrender, and never back down from a fight for freedom. The day humanity chose defiance over survival became the day they learned what it truly meant to be human. When faced with impossible odds and certain death, they had chosen to stand and fight rather than live as slaves. That choice had saved not just their own species, but had lit a spark of rebellion that would spread to every corner of the galaxy. Years later, when other species asked about that fateful day, the survivors would smile and say simply that they had no choice. Freedom was worth any price, and some things were more important than survival. The galaxy had learned that humanity was a species, unlike any other, one that would fight to the death rather than accept defeat.